welcome everybody. Giant crowd of people that we have here. Thank you for attending our 15th annual Bonsai Show. My name is Chip Carter. I don't take this whole thing seriously, so this is a very informal demonstration. If you have questions, blurt them out, raise a hand, whatever. We'll try to have a good time. I have a really bad problem when I start working on trees, I shut up. And so then people are going, okay, what are you doing? So that's why we have Mike. Mike is going to be doing most of the talking while I'm working on a tree so I can focus on a tree. That and also it helps me get it done a lot faster. So we're not sitting here at 6 o'clock tonight going, with that.
All right.
Take it away.
Well, so like Chip said, he's going to be doing a bonsai for you today. He's going to be doing what's called a Psyche, which is more of like a forest-style planting. So that's why that tree will be going in this pot here, which is quite larger than the tree itself. So he'll be using rocks and other things to create kind of a natural landscape. Bonsai pots, we can start with these. So as you can see, there's plenty of holes in here. We want to make sure that there's ample drainage. So we really don't want water to stay, surprisingly, into these. So all of our soils are rock-based with pumice, lava, akadama. I'm sure I'm missing one.
No, pumice, lava, akadama.
And so as you can see, there's not a lot of water retention in this soil. Can you pass that around? Reason being is we don't want root rot. We want to promote root growth. And so that soil is good for promoting root growth because the roots will grow into the soil or the pumice or the lava rock, which is actually relatively sharp. And so when the roots are growing, that will actually act like a knife and cut those roots. So it'll keep growing finer and finer roots as it's growing. And so that's part of the reason why we use that soil. The other part is also drainage. There's very little organic material. What would you say, 10%, if that?
Yeah, for this particular planting, probably virtually nothing. The organic material would be added if we had like a deciduous tree, maples, hawthorn, whatever. But typically, like your conifers, your junipers, you want to stay mostly inorganic.
And so yeah, that will drain quite well out of here. So because it drains so much, you're going to want to water it more frequently. If you're here in Livermore area, I water my trees about every other day in this time of year. And just keep watering it until it runs completely out of the pot. All of the nutrients that this tree is going to get is anything that you feed it. So you have to fertilize it to keep it alive, but then to keep new growth and eventually get it to grow bigger and bigger. Any questions? If there's any questions at all, just shout out, raise your hand, whatever you want to do, but back and forth always helps. I use pellets now. I used to use a liquid fertilizer, but I switched. So I fertilize about every 3 months. It takes for those pellets to degrade. And I use pellet baskets, so I know where exactly they are and what condition they are in. So that way I'm not over fertilizing, which I have killed trees doing that. I have killed many trees. So that's part of bonsai, right?
Is used to give me a hard time that bonsai is the ancient word for tree killer.
And so I've killed more than I have, that's for sure. But I have about 20 trees now, which are all healthy. I've been doing it for long enough, but I definitely had my fair share.
Do they die like early stage of replanting the bonsai, or like he's doing it right now? Like the percentage of they dying is more during the early months or the early stages?
No, not really. I've had fully mature trees die. Sometimes it's my fault, sometimes it's not. I've had trees get knocked over and pots break, and I don't see it until 6 o'clock in the evening, and by then the roots are all dried out. But typically, as long as you feed and water and care for your tree, the mortality rate does drop quite a bit.
Yeah. And so throughout the course of working on your bonsai, most people see what he's doing here, which is, trimming the foliage, but you also have to trim the roots. I think it's every so many years, 5 years or so, you want to check the roots.
Depends on the age of the tree. You get a much younger tree like this, you probably want to repot every 2, maybe 3 years. You get a specimen tree like the giant blue atlas cedar in the center of the room. That's about an every 10-year repot.
And so, in doing that, you're going to start reducing some of that root structure that's built up, so you can give more room to the tree to grow, continue to grow, even below on the root system. So what he's doing now is he's kind of trying to gain a shape of the tree here by looking at it, checking the trunk, the branching of it, and really kind of determine how this is going to look. A lot of trees, you'll notice that mainly the very first branch you see on a tree is generally the biggest branch. So that's a good indicator or way that you can use to start where your first branch is going to be as you're looking at the trunk and developing a tree. So when he's done, there's going to be about 10% of this left. So he's going to take out quite a bit of root, and I think the root ratio is what, 20%?
10 to 20%.
10 to 20%. Yeah.
Style is he working on?
He's doing a Psyche, which isn't really.
Maybe it'll probably be a hunting guy, semi-cascade, windswept. Maybe I haven't quite figured out what this guy's going to do yet, but it will definitely not be a formal upright because there's no way to get branches to do that. So probably a semi-cascade windswept style is the direction I'm going with this guy.
And part of that working with trees or developing a tree is you look at the natural growth of it and try to use that to your advantage as you're developing the trunk and the branching.
Tell us a little bit more about what he's looking for and what he's
Sure.
getting rid of.
Yeah. So right now he's kind of clearing out some of the foliage that was growing real tight up against the trunk and kind of open that up so he can get a look at it. And then same with at the very base of the branching. So he'll open that up a little bit because you don't want any foliage at the base of the branch. You want it more towards the end. So he's working from the trunk outward to kind of see what's there, and then he's going to determine what branches come and go.
So bonsai, if you translate it, bonsai actually translates to potted plant. What we're trying to do with our potted plants is to try to develop a realistic looking tree in a smaller package. So we try to find, there is no such thing as bonsai seeds. I mean, you can find the Berkey package of bonsai seeds, but those are just tree seeds. We can take pretty much any type of plant with a woody trunk and develop it into bonsai. You can thyme, rosemary, make great bonsai, and the wonderful thing is when you're done pruning them, you can have spaghetti. You like the junipers; they're nice because they got really fine, tight foliage.
They're hardy. They're hardy too.
Yeah,
they're one of the hardy ones.
The only trees that you probably wouldn't ever bonsai would be like the sycamore trees that have the leaves that are like this big. It would never get small enough, proportion enough to make it look realistic.
How about fruit trees?
You can do fruit trees.
I've got a kumquat tree that I have, which looks kind of like a little orange tree because of the kumquat size. But the leafing on it is pretty big. So there is ways that you can reduce the leaf size by pruning the leaves, the bigger leaves, and continue that process. And eventually it'll start growing smaller leaves because it knows that those aren't going to get cut off. You know, if they grow too big, it's just going to get cut off. So eventually the plant learns and will start growing smaller leaves. Not significantly, but Valley Oak. Yeah. Yeah, oak trees are good for bonsai, although they're sharp. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Like over on the sale table, there's a bunch of saplings there that people harvest and stuff. In fact, that's a good way to start a tree and really just start it from scratch. It is with a sapling. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, so once he clears this up a little bit, he's going to start probably shaping. And to do that, he's going to use some wire. So there's different kinds of wire. You have copper wire, aluminum wire. Aluminum's a little bit more forgiving. So I use a lot of aluminum just because you can wrap it, unwrap it, and wrap it again. So it's a little forgiving. Copper wire, once it wraps, it's kind of hardens a little bit, and then it's a little less forgiving. So you really want to make sure you're wrapping it correctly with copper wire. But like a wrapping technique is you have to always anchor something. So if you wrap a branch, you can just sit there and it'll just keep spinning while you're trying to wrap it. And so the idea is you always want to anchor it to another branch. So you can just sit there and just keep wrapping. And so it holds on nice and tight because you anchored it there. So that's one of the techniques that he's going to use to really kind of get some bends out of it. Wire cutters, actually. Can I steal that from you?
Yeah, just a couple pieces of wire to go around.
So when I first started, I used Home Depot wire cutters that I could buy because I do a lot of electrical work myself, and I had a pair. So I started using those, and it worked for what it was, but the actual bonsai wire cutters are so much nicer. For one, as you can see, they're rounded here. And so when you're cutting the wire, I can sit here and do this all day long and not cut my finger. So you're not going to cut into the branch when you're trying to cut this wire back off. So it's very helpful, but also they're just so darn sharp that they just cut like butter. Way better than electrical ones. They don't do any wire stripping, but you don't need to in bonsai. So, and right now he's still kind of pruning it back a little bit, but he's exposed some of the trunk line there. So now you can kind of see, actually that's got really nice movement. You can see the movement of the trunk right there. I'm assuming that's the front.
This? Yeah, probably that.
Okay. So it's good to try to determine also what front is. And so you can kind of work from there when you're developing this tree. Also in the planting, he's going to be adding some of this rock here, which is like a pumice rock or a lava rock. Is it pumice? Pumice rock. He'll be adding that, which is pretty cool because like eventually you can get like mosses and stuff to grow on it because it's, you know, porous in nature.
Use the wire for?
For shaping. So
here in a little bit, I'll be. Oh, you got that.
Yeah, like this tree here has been wired. In fact, this is the runner-up prize today also. But it has been wired so you can see some of that movement and shape. And that's how it was created to really give it that kind of tree look. And if you notice, almost every style of bonsai tree is in the shape of a triangle. There's only really one style that isn't, and that's more of a broom style, which is located on the top left of that chart there. All the others are kind of in a triangle shape, and it really kind of, like this looks, you know, it looks more like a tree that way. It definitely does.
The wiring process is more of an iterative one, so you kind of be bending the limb back later and bend a little more. If you wanted to do like this horseshoe.
Yeah, yeah. So like something like this, the winner of this tree or that tree, in about 3 months, I'd say, give or take, you might want to consider cutting that wire off. because what will happen is you've got it nice and tight on there. Well, that branch is going to continue to grow, and if it does that, then it'll start scarring, and you'll see marks, spiral marks up and down your branching, and those scars don't go away. So sometimes I've even done it where I've wired a tree, a few months later, cut it off. Oh no, it moved again. So I had to rewire it again and try it, for another 3 months.
This arc here, was it all done in one wiring?
Yeah, in one bend. So they wired it up, and then they took it and they bent it into place. And then the wire kind of holds that place for it. Absolutely, absolutely. So these junipers are the best. They're great beginner trees, but they're very flexible. I've tried wiring Japanese maples and snapped, beautiful branches. I wish I hadn't. So some trees are definitely a lot easier to wire than others.
Yeah, don't try to wire an elm. They'll break a branch just if you look at it.
Is there a method to making the trunk bigger?
Fertilizer.
on that tree?
There's different fertilizers you can use. I would, huh?
Or put it in the ground.
Yeah, if you just transplant it straight into the ground for a few years and then dig it back up again, that's a good way to get that trunk thickened. The different fertilizers, so they sell different kinds. I recently got some at Stone Lantern, which is a website. I think they do have one there for more mature bonsai, which allows for more root growth and more trunk growth as well. Yeah, you can leave a branch to sacrifice later, and that will help get some of that nutrient. So you might leave a branch way down here that doesn't look right, but it's giving nutrients to that area of the tree. So it'll thicken up that way as well.
What size wire do I use?
So as you can see, the wire comes in all different sizes, and I've seen people use rebar for big trees, but you generally want to look at the size of the branch that you're going to bend and kind of determine. So you would need thicker aluminum wire as opposed to copper wire, because copper wire is a little harder and can hold better. So something like this gauge wire would be just fine. I can pass this around. I've been bending it in my hand the whole time.
There you go. This is copper.
Yeah, there's copper, and here's an aluminum one too. Here's an aluminum one.
Oh, aluminum.
And so right now he's starting to wire. He's done his anchoring of the wire, and he's going up each individual main branch he's going to keep, so he can go ahead and get the ultimate shape of the tree.
Put the wire on and then shape it.
Yes. Yeah, and the wire will hold that shape. So yeah, and if the winner today does win the tree and wants to get the wire off, bring it back in 2 to 3 months, and we'll help you out with that.
The one thing you also want to, he talked about anchoring wire, but the other thing we want to do is when you're applying wire, you got to make sure that you do not capture any foliage underneath the wire, because otherwise it's not that it's really bad per se. What it is it just that foliage will end up dying off, and then it just looks ugly.
And so in some instances also you'll want to wire it to the pot itself, just to gain that extra stability for the tree. I don't know if you'd need to in this Psyche. Will you, Bede?
I'll probably wire a little bit.
Okay. Here, I'm going to squeeze behind you for a second. I'm going to take your chair. It's folded up behind you, so don't sit down.
Actually, I'll probably forget it.
Let's see. You got scissors? Here we go. So right here is some screen material that we use. And so some of the holes in some of the pots are rather big. And the soil that I passed around earlier is awful small. And so in order to keep it in the pot, we put these in the holes and kind of wire them down. So that way it can hold the soil in place, but we can also drain really well when we water.
Those hurt cups or something.
Wire all the branches?
All the ones you want to move.
Yeah, the only reason to put wire on a tree is if you need to move a branch. Some people feel like, it's a bonsai, I have to wire it. If the branch is where you want it to be, you don't need to put wire on it. It's only if you want to move something. If I've got a branch over here and I want it here, then I'd put wire on it to move it. But there's other ways of moving a branch. We could use, if you've got two branches that are like this that you want to separate a little bit, you can put like a piece of cork between the two that helps force them apart. If you want to bring a branch down, you could add a weight, like a fishing weight on the end of the branch, which would then help pull the branch down. So there's a number of ways that we can move branches, but the easiest way is just to put wire.
So yeah, some of the branching on this tree here hasn't necessarily been wired either. That they use the natural area or shape of the branch.
You said it removed the wire after maybe 3 months.
Yeah, give or
That's
take.
because you didn't want to damage the tree. Right?
Yeah. So
how long does it take to actually shape the tree?
it depends on the type of tree and the environment, and so time of year. So I generally, as a rule of thumb, try to say about 3 months, but it could be sooner, it could be later. So what you're looking for is swelling. So you can see in my chubby little finger here that when I really put it tight, you got some swelling going on here. And so when that starts occurring on the branch, then it's scarring. And so that scar will be there for the life of the plant. And so are you making gin?
Yeah.
So he's going to be making a little bit of gin on here. And what that is he's effectively stripping all the bark and everything off of a branch and killing it. And so what he's going to do is it adds look and age to a tree in ginning. And so he's using that pair of pliers there, and he's just kind of breaking the bark up, and he's going to peel it all off and just make that branch dead.
Or tear it off. Oops. It's all part of the plan.
And so in nature too, a tear like that's better because you're going to get like a natural break, as opposed to if you cut it, it's straight and flat, and that doesn't happen in nature.
Doesn't have chainsaws.
Yeah, and there's no mini landscapers for these guys. And so yeah, in breaking the branch is actually better than cutting it for that natural look.
And the dead look just for style and appearance.
Yeah.
Yep, and give it that look of being a little older than it is, and that's part of the trick of bonsai is making it look bigger in a small package, but also making it look older as well. So in time, it'll change colors a little bit. It'll kind of whiten or gray out a little bit, and that gives it more age. So the longer this lives, the older that's going to look. And some of that stuff you just can't synthesize. Some of the cracking that happens when it dries out. So you can see in some really old deadwood examples where you got some of that kind of natural cracking and stuff going on. So difference between gin and Nabari? Sherry, excuse me. Sherry is sherry trunk. Yes. Okay. So sherry's like dead parts of the trunk. When you're killing that off, you create a vein of natural tree, kind of like this driftwood right here. So see how it's got like a vein of a live material, and somebody went through and actually killed the rest of that trunk line to give it that older appearance.
talk about tools.
Tools.
Talk about,
Talked about wire cutters.
what about
But
wood cutters?
yeah.
Non-cutters?
So yeah, the different kinds of tools and the way they cut actually help significantly in how you're terminating what you're cutting. So something like this I've used to actually kind of develop what kind of a more concave look. So like like if you want like a like a tree you see like a hole in where a little owl lives and it's all happy forest. Yeah, you can do something like that with these. You just keep cutting away at it and you get that nice concave look. This is a more straight approach, so you can really get up against the trunk and cut it flat. So eventually it'll disappear. Also, all of these tools are, like I was saying earlier, pretty nice. This he's going to be using in a minute. This is just really, he's going to go crazy on the roots and just Freddy Krueger on that thing. So that's really all this is for. And chopsticks. We use chopsticks a lot. I went to Costco and bought myself a 50-pack, but we use them primarily to, dig at the soils and get any kind of air pockets that are in there when he's actually planting that. So that's generally what we use them, but you can use them for turnbuckles. You can use them for extra support for things. I've got branches propping up on them and stuff, but yeah, they definitely work good. It's a good cheap tool.
Cheap. I like that.
Yeah, me too. So he's wrapping one of the bigger branches here, being careful not to hit any of the smaller branches on the large branch that he's wrapping. So it takes a little bit. Then he's going to get his bend on this branch here.
Talked about the pots. Why would you choose that bigger one over the smaller one?
Oh,
this.
Perfect. So pots generally have all different kinds of meanings and really kind of add to the style of the tree. So there's different methods in picking out which pot for which tree. And so this is definitely for something like a cycad or where you have multiple trees, a forest type planting, you're going to need a large space. The thickness of the pot is also, in relation to trunk generally is what you're trying to do. So the thinner the pot, the smaller the trunk, or the smaller the trunk, the thinner the pot.
Typically, we want 1.5 times the diameter of the trunk to the depth of the pot. There are exceptions. You want to, like boxwoods, any of the shrubbery type trees, you want to go with a little bit thicker pot, deeper pot, even though the proportions aren't the same, but for the health of the tree. Because if you look at like a boxwood, they've just got these really, really fine filamentous roots that they produce a lot of. And you got to think about where they grow. They grow in the understory, so what they do is they throw out just a ton of roots because they're fighting against the bigger trees that already have well-established roots. So they'll throw out a lot of little ones. And so you need a little bit deeper pot because they also don't like the big cycle of moisture versus dryness. They want to stay a little damper a little longer. So you're asking about the deep bend. So I've got this branch here that's facing this direction. Give me a second. Thanks.
And so some of the pots, as you can see in this diagram, there's different shapes and different colors. And so with the cascade pots here, you got a deeper pot because you got that tree growing downwards just to kind of keep that up in the air a little bit. Technically, you get glazed and unglazed pots as well. Glazed pots are technically considered a female type of a pot. So you want trees that drop leaves throughout the year. Fruiting trees are another good one to put in glazed pots. Did you? Evergreens are generally what you want in the terracotta style pot. And it's just, that's like a rule. It's, formal. Our club, we don't really practice that, but formally that is the way to do it.
It doesn't really matter. The tree doesn't care.
No. Round pots are also considered more feminine. Square pots are a little more masculine. and it kind of flows along that line throughout.
We're not sexist.
Yeah, no, but yeah, generally that's the official practice of it. And so, like I said, he's gonna keep cutting on that thing. So
And you want to get rid of all the stuff underneath that branch, right? So it has a straight edge.
Yep. So one of the things is, again, we're trying to develop the illusion of age. If you look at a mature tree, there's very little branches growing on the underside of the mature tree's branch, because if you think about it, that's always getting shaded. So any new foliage or branches that try to grow, they're always getting shaded out by the larger branch, so they generally die off on the underside. So typically we try to, when we're developing our trees, is you try to prune off anything that's growing straight down, again, to help with the illusion of a more mature tree.
another way to think about it too is when you're developing a tree like this, imagine a tiny little bird being able to fly in and land on a branch. That's kind of what you're trying to develop here, is the idea of having that space, which also counts.
And also, when you thin it out like that, it helps a lot of sunlight get into the inner branches, and then helps with the growth of the inner branches, as well as developing foliage further into the tree.
And so another thing with bonsai too is movement. We like a lot of movement within our trees, and as you can see with the wire and everything, he's created quite a bit of movement there. And even with all the examples on the board behind him, there's just formal upright and a slanted upright. We have a very large one in the center of the room there. But if you notice, most of the other trees have a bit of natural, just kind of movement to them.
Let's see what else. Indoor, outdoor.
So there are few indoor bonsai that you can make and keep indoors, but most of them are generally outdoor. I'd say at least out there, 80-90% of all those are outdoor.
Yeah.
And so indoor bonsais are more like tropical type trees. You know, you got your umbrella trees, ficus trees are really popular. Jade's another one, although all my jade are outdoors. Maybe that's why they look so bad. Yeah.
You can get some trees to adapt to it being indoors. Like you can get like elms or olives maybe, but you got to kind of train them to enjoy being indoors.
I've got a tea tree that I keep indoors, and it just is really happy, and I'm keeping it alive. But yeah, so that one is generally an outdoor tree that it's just happy where it's at inside. So it gets morning sunlight, and then that's it for the day. All of my trees, I live in Livermore, so it's very hot climate, as a lot of you know. So I do everything I can to maintain moisture for my trees. So I have on my stand with my trees, I keep a lot of lava rock on it, and then I have my trees sitting on top of it. And when I'm watering it, all that excess water gets in the lava rock, and throughout the day kind of creates moisture as it dries out. So that's a little trick I use, but I also make sure that all of my trees, most of them only get morning sun. So by about 2 o'clock, they're getting indirect sunlight.
You have your pots on the lava rock?
Yes. I have mine just sitting right on top of the lava rock. And I've even got a big one, like one of the ones out there, sitting on a stand on lava rock as well.
Bigger lava rock than what you
Yes, much bigger than what I use, the Home Depot special. But
How many times do you
so I water about every other day at this time. And I have a automatic timer that I use for when I'm on vacation and stuff, but I generally keep that running. And so that waters once for me for a couple of minutes at about 3 o'clock when the shade is hit my bonsai. And then in the evening, I'll go and actually water them by hand on the same day. So I'm not over watering, but Yeah, I do water my trees quite a bit.
Do you water from the top, like from the branches and all that? Or
Just the soils generally. If you water on the top, what's going to happen too, especially in the sun, is you're going to start burning your foliage. And so you really, especially the more waxy leaves, aren't going to really take in that moisture anyways. So generally, I water just the soils.
What water quality?
I put in filters at my house, so all of my water is filtered, even my hose. I'd say the water quality hasn't been too much of an issue because I mean a lot of these plants are in nature just growing with just whatever water they get. Do you filter your water at all, Chip?
No.
Can you explain about the hazard?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So softened water is another thing. Luckily, I don't have that. But that's going to add salt content to your water, which isn't really good at all. That'll help kill it quickly. Also, reclaimed water. If some people out here are using reclaimed water, that has a lot of nitrates in it, and it's great for some plants and will absolutely devastate others. So I know, just for instance, the golf course over there, Las Positas Golf Course here in Livermore, they had watered their entire course with reclaimed water. However, after about a year of that, they realized they had to mow their greens 3 times a day to keep up with the growth because of the nitrates in the water. So they went back and made sure that those were watered with domestic, and the rest of everything else is reclaimed. So yeah, it'll kill. Reclaimed will kill a lot of trees. What is it? Crab apples. Different trees do well, and some just don't at all. So I'd be very cautious with watering with reclaimed.
You're doing commercials for Zone 7 water.
I could do it all day long.
For to be watering this guy right here
Mhm.
with your on the drip, and then how much water would you give it? Like,
I would give it water until it's completely saturated, until it doesn't want any more, and give it a little bit more. Get it fully wet. It'll run out the bottom relatively quick. And so it'll just keep running out the bottom. So what you want to do is all this little soil is just get the water in all those little pockets of the pumice. And so,
like a gallon of water for that?
yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I would take a hose and just maybe for, 15 seconds, 20 seconds with the hose, and should be good enough.
Get your trees in direct sun, indirect, shaded.
Direct sun until about 2 o'clock, and then they're in indirect sun the rest of the day. And then my maples are in indirect sun all the time. So it really depends on the species and where you want to put it and your yard. So you got to kind of work with what you got. These little guys right here could do sun all day. You could also do just morning sun. So a lot of my junipers, they're all in the sun until 2 o'clock. But yeah, like my Japanese maple, that's in indirect sun all the time because it'll wilt or burn the leaves, and yeah.
Use shade cloth?
Yes, yeah.
What percentage?
You know what? I just bought an umbrella last year and just stuck an umbrella literally on its side and blocked the morning sun from them. This year I took one of my full-grown maple trees, wired it up, bent a branch down, and now I don't need an umbrella anymore.
But yeah, like 40-50% shade is probably ideal.
And so what Chip's doing right now is he's going to wire those rocks to the pot, kind of help give them a little stability. Even though he's going to pack the soil in there real good, those things are pretty big, and the more stable you can make them, the better. Just so you guys can see the tree, that's the front, right? Yeah. So here's the front of the tree.
You're an artist.
Yeah, it was easy for me.
Good narrative. Where'd you get the big
Where did you get those?
The lava?
Yeah.
The pumice? I used to be able to get it at the place,
Voss
Ace,
in Dublin? Oh,
Ace down in Pleasanton. They used to carry it, but I don't think they. LH Voss in Dublin used to carry it. I haven't seen it lately there. I haven't been there in a while, but the place on Osgood in Fremont sometimes has it. It just, you got to look around. Sometimes even like, well, yeah, you got to go up to the volcano area.
Amazon.
You could probably
Yeah.
order.
probably.
Amazon has.
Amazon's got everything. I know I recently picked up some dragonstone, which is popular for aquariums, to do a psyche. So yeah, you can use different kinds of rocks for that. But pumice is really popular.
It's easy to work.
You can shape it easy. It's easy to work with. Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you are working with pumice, I would highly recommend safety goggles and gloves. This stuff is effectively glass, and so it is very sharp. I can't tell you how many times I've ended up with needing Band-Aids after working with this stuff. So.
Yeah. I will always wear rubber gloves when I work on trees. I'm actually allergic to junipers. Great hobby, right? So I always wear rubber gloves when I'm working on trees, and the rubber gloves are nice because I can get in there and still have that textile with my fingers. But yeah, I'm always wearing gloves.
Those medical kind of gloves.
Yeah, those are even better. Yeah,
Because they're real tight fitting and the spiky stuff doesn't puncture.
yeah, those are even better. The medical kinds.
The medical kind of gloves are the ones that the doctors take on and throw away.
Yeah, the thicker ones, they go a little higher on the wrist. Those are nice. And so, can you hand me the moss? So what he's going to be using for ground cover to help you maintain the look of a landscape, he's going to be using a lot of moss, just collected, harvested from underneath the downspout somewhere that's just leaky. Perfect for this. So moss is always great. Little ground covers like that little guy. Kind of small stuff, and so it'll add to the idea that this is bigger, and so it's all perception. What he did is he tied it real tight around the rock, the base of the rock, and then he took another wire and hooked it around that, and then pulled it through the bottom, and so that way it'll hold it in place. But when he puts the soil, yeah, yep. And so when he puts the soil in, all that wire will be underneath the soil. Yep.
Undid itself on.
At least he's still at a point where he can flip it over. So how long have you been doing bonsai, Chip?
24 years.
So he's been doing it for 24. I've been here for, 12, 15?
Like that.
Something like that. Lost track of time.
Can't dispute it.
What was your first tree, Chip?
My very first tree was a Kingsville boxwood, and that's a little history. That is why we do this on the Father's Day weekend, because I got a Kingsville boxwood for Father's Day, and it was a little bitty guy about that big, and I promptly killed it. So I said, "Honey, can I get another one?" She said, "Yes." So I went out and got another bonsai tree. I think it was another Kingsville boxwood tree, and I promptly killed that one. I was like, I better figure out what I'm doing if I want to keep doing this. So that's kind of where it all started. I blame my children.
And so Chip started the club, and we meet here generally in this room. Was it the third Saturday of the month? Third Saturday of the month at 2:00. And a lot of us bring in trees. We get help from the other members and guidance on what to do. And it's really a good collective with all different sorts of talent levels that we have. And it's really a great group of people. But
we don't take ourselves seriously. So.
yeah, thankfully. So now he's going to go ahead and get rid of all of that soil. Pretty much all of it's going to go.
Splash zone.
So what he's doing is he's going to loosen up all that soil and try to keep as much of that root intact. He'll probably trim off excess root that's not really doing much for the plant. And so all of the nutrients in these trees are all coming in through the small root system. The larger roots aren't really effectively doing anything for it. It's like a branch as opposed to a leaf. So the roots are kind of the same way.
Theoretically,
I believe so, yeah. So now where to put it? Oh, there you go. Any questions?
You talked about fertilizing, you talked about watering.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you repot?
Repotting, it depends on the tree. A new tree like this, you can probably get at least 5 years out of it before you want to look at it. Yeah, 3 to 5 years before you want to look at the roots. And then what I've done, even some of my older trees that are 30, 40 years old, you can take them out, you can pull off some of that root and put it right back in the same pot. And then that gives it room to grow again, so it gets happy, and you'll notice even an uptick in the green growth at that point, because it's just really happy once you start doing that. Because when they get root bound, they stop taking in as much nutrients, and then you start seeing a decline in the green, in the root growth or the foliage growth. So they kind of go hand in hand.
So how much is Chip going to prune off those roots?
He'll probably take off, let me see. Actually, that's not too bad. Maybe just a little bit more here. Might leave that, depending, but actually, you can probably take that little nub. So yeah, probably something like that.
Like, do you personally have a feeling about the wood chips that get mixed in nursery?
No, I mean, they break down eventually. This is organic, so it will hold more moisture than our soils, and it'll hold it longer. Yeah, a little bit's not going to hurt anything. Eventually, in 3 to 5 years, those will probably, some of them will be broken down. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry about just a little bit of them in there.
Got a before picture.
Okay. I am the worst at before pictures. I wish I would get better at that.
Better at what?
Taking before pictures.
Oh,
I'm always like halfway through it going, oh, before.
With your older trees, the 30, 40, 50 year old, how often would you repot?
Probably, every 10 years or so. And then you can kind of really see when it needs to be. Because like I said, you'll start seeing like less new growth on the tree. It might be an indicator. Some yellowing might start occurring.
You don't have to worry about being root bound?
Yeah, that's why you take it out, you cut some roots off, and you put it right back in. Yeah.
And that's okay for an older tree.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have an older tree
Mm-hmm.
that I had to use a sawzall, okay, to get it, around,
Uh-huh.
and then it was really difficult. I couldn't really figure it out.
Yeah, I've had to break pots to get trees out. Yeah.
But I want to do that. I want to should you dry it out maybe a little bit? And
Soaking it sometimes helps. So like taking the whole thing and putting it in, like I have some cement mixing tubs I use for it, and I'll fill it with water, take the whole pot and the whole tree and just sit it right in there. And sometimes when you're root bound, that's actually a good way to water, because if it's too root bound, you're only going to get very little penetration, say near the pot, but the main part of the root's not getting that water that you need because it's so root bound. So in doing it that way, it's going to suck it up from the bottom until you can get to a season where you can do a repot. Repotting season, you want to do that. I'd say sometime around October is a good time to do it. And again, in March, April, something like that would be another good time to do repotting. In the summer right now, it's just too hot. It's not really the best time to repot. The winter either, because you're dealing with frost. And that's another thing about watering too, is in the winter, you're going to want to water these almost as much as you do in the summertime. So you can rely on the rainwater, but you want to make sure that your soils are good and moist, because the moist soil isn't going to freeze. When it dries out, it'll freeze the roots. So you want to make sure that there's a good amount of water you're still doing in the wintertime. And so he's taking the soil now and kind of filling it in. And like I said, it's all rock. There's no organic he's going to be using today in this.
Chip, have you shaken that soil, that the rocks that you're putting in has a lot of dust and stuff?
Yeah, it
Do
really
you
should.
do that ahead of time?
No, this should have been sifted out to get some of the dust out, but when I water it, it'll grab a lot of the dust away from the.
Are you going to be using muck today?
No, I didn't make any.
Muck is something we use when we're doing, say, something like this, but without rocks, and we kind of want a mound or something like that. We'll use what's called muck, and it's really just moss and water kind of broken down. What do you use? Cornstarch also?
I use a cornstarch and then a akadama dust and what's this? Sphagnum moss.
Yeah, sphagnum moss. And so what that does is it kind of gives it a nice hard clay kind of soil, and you can use that to kind of build yourself up. You don't have to worry too much. You just make sure that you can still get water penetration into the root area, but you can use that, especially on a pot like this, if you really want to like mound it up, and like so it looks like it's on a hill of its own. You can use that kind of stuff. And this was purchased at our very own Alden Lane. So he's got the tree in position, and now he's working on the landscape portion of it.
That'll have some organics.
Yeah. So you'll want to keep the organics when you're doing a cycad like this for your other plants. So for these little whatever they are, clover type looking things, even for moss, you want to keep a little bit of that organic for it because it likes that extra moisture, especially in our climate.
Okay, so that's this stuff the other this right there.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got that stuff growing up. I've got a tree with a lot of exposed roots. That stuff's growing in between those, and I don't want those there anymore.
Yeah, wire brush. And take a wire brush and scrape it out. So I've got a Japanese maple right now that's got too much moss growing on it. And the moss is pretty and it gives it a nice look, but when it starts growing onto the root system, what it's doing is eventually you're going to start eating away at those roots that it's growing on, and it'll rot it. And so as it looks pretty, it also is damaging the plant. So there's a nice happy medium there. So what I'll do to that plant is I'll get it off the roots and just keep it in the pot still. But yeah, in your case, I would take a wire brush and just kind of scrub at it a little bit.
How stiff? I
Just
don't want to damage those roots.
toothbrush works too.
Toothbrush.
Toothbrush and water, if you're really trying to be gentle with it.
I had some discoloration on the bark of a tree, and I used a nylon brush.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, in my bonsai bucket, I've got toothbrushes and chopsticks and corks.
Yeah, I don't have to do that. It's out of control. I take it and I try to get as much as I can.
Yeah.
But pretty soon they grow.
It just grows right back.
They're happy down
Yep.
there.
Yeah, I would definitely try the brush.
Most of them one time that worked pretty good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they came back with a vengeance. Particularly after
And so, what numbers would you recommend for fertilizer?
I go the even
10, 10, 10?
10, 10, 10, 7, 7, 7, something like that.
Okay, so yeah, when you're fertilizing, look for something like a 10, 10, 10 or a 7, 7 something.
What those numbers are is NPK, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Right. I always get the name. So what it is, when you look at any fertilizer box, it'll have 3 numbers on it, and those are the percentages of the various chemistries, which were nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and what that does is sometimes if you want like a high nitrogen fertilizer, then the first number you want a big number, and then the other one's like a 27.55 or something like that. So depending upon the time of year and the type of tree you're fertilizing, changes, kind of what types of fertilizers you're going to use.
And you don't generally need to fertilize the seeds in the winter. Just because of the rain, the fertilizer is really just kind of washing out of the pot. Plus, it's kind of more of a dormant time for the plant. So the fertilizer really doesn't do much. It doesn't hurt anything, but it's just kind of a waste. So yeah, I fertilize early spring throughout until about November, December, just about the cold when it starts getting cold.
What are you at right now?
Just it's a top dressing. It's basically a black lava instead of the red lava that everybody uses. Just to kind of give it a little bit more. So it matches. All right, we ready for the big reveal here?
Yep. There it goes.
Very nice.
Very nice.